The miniature we're using for today's tutorial is Thurkle the Barbarian from Primal Collectibles, and it's part of the Masters of Dungeon Quest package. It's a great model with great skin, so let's get cracking. Our light source for this model is going to be from the upper left, emphasising the upper arm, the chest, the face and the upper left thigh. The paints I'm using today are all from AK Interactive 3rd generation. Violet red, brick red, saddle brown, beige red and sunny skin tone, which is going to be our highlight colour. I'm using Winsor & Newton size 0 and size 1 and a very cheap synthetic brush. And don't forget to hit the like, the subscribe and the notification bell to help grow the channel. We're starting to base coat the model now with the 4 parts saddle brown, 1 part beige red, 1 part brick red and 1 part violet red. This colour is quite similar to Bugman's Glow from Citadel. As you can see, I'm applying the paint with my cheap synthetic brush. This brush cost me around 50 cents and I've been using it for 3 or 4 months now, and it's still great for base coating, washes, glazing and keeps a really good shape. So we've speeded up the footage here just so we can get as much in the video as possible. The paint I'm applying has very little water in it. I'm really only using the moisture from the wet palette to keep it fluid. I don't like to base coat and put colours on with too thin a paint. It just makes more work by adding more layers. 2 good layers are applied and this is enough to cover the model. We're adding in the first layer of shadows now. We're taking our base coat and adding some violet red and some brick red. The violet red gives us a little bit of a cold tint to the shadows and really helps emphasize the muscles. While painting the shadows, I try to push the paint into the darkest, deepest recesses. This way it keeps our base coat intact and it leaves us plenty of room on those muscles to add highlights later. I've also thinned this mix down a bit. I've added 1 to 2 parts water just so the paint will flow and it's easy to push around the model. While adding these shadows, I'm constantly thinking about the light source and the direction of the light. In areas where recesses are deeper or more in shadow, I'm adding more layers of paint and building up deeper, darker shadows. On to our first highlight. We've taken our base coat and added a touch of sunny skin tone. This adds a bit more of a yellowy tone to our colour, which is perfect for highlighting muscles. I'm not trying to blend too much at this stage while applying the paint. It's more important at this stage to get the paint in the right areas to emphasize the volumes of the muscles. Also, there's not a great deal of dilution to this layer of paint. Nowhere near as much as I added for the shadows, as I want the highlights to be stronger and I want them to stand out. We'll worry about the blending later. One thing that is important to notice here is the nature of acrylic paints. You'll notice that I go over the same area many times, and that is to build up depth and opacity. When I'm first adding each layer of paint, it dries and then looks thin. So I'm constantly having to go back and reapply to get brighter and more opaque colours. So, on to doing some glazing now. I've got my base coat mix with a bit of sunny skin tone and 2 to 3 parts water. It's quite thin at this stage. And I'm just trying to blend the shadow, the mid-tone and the highlight a bit more together. Once this glazing layer is done, I get a much better sense of which areas need more highlight and more shadow. The way I apply the paint here is I dip the brush in the paint and I wick it off on a paper towel. So I essentially unload a lot of the water and paint from the brush. This gives me a lot more control of where I'm actually putting the glaze and putting the paint. So we're adding our second highlight to the model now, and as you can see from the glazing that I did earlier, I can now clearly see the light areas and the shadow areas of the model. So at this stage I'm just trying to emphasize the muscles with a little bit more sunny skin tone. At this stage I don't worry too much about the blending. The paint is maybe slightly thinner, but if it stands out or it's stark, I don't worry too much because I'll just glaze it back and blend it in at a later stage of the process. Right, on to more glazing now. I'm using the highlight mix I've just used with about 2 to 3 parts water. It's quite thin. And I'm just pushing from the outside of the highlight up into the highlight, just to blend it in and smooth it out. As this layer is so thin, it can take many coats for you to actually start seeing a difference to the paintwork you have. I quite often will add 2 to 6 coats before I really smooth that paint out. So just be patient and trust in the process. And also point out that when I'm painting skin like this, once I've painted this paint on, I move on to another area and it dries so quickly that you can come back to the parts you've already painted and start applying other coats. So we're on to the final deep shadows that we're adding to the skin. We've added more violet red and more brick red to our mix now. And this is going to help give us more contrast and add a bit more depth of colour in those shadows. This mix is also thinned down quite a lot. It's more like a glaze, and it's quite easy to push this paint up into the deepest areas of shadow. So here is the finished skin that I've painted on this tutorial. I've gone around and blacked out the rest of the parts of the miniature, and you can see that this shows much better how the skin really looks in terms of the model's composition. I hope you've enjoyed watching this, and join me for part 2 where I'll be painting the face and the hair. Thanks for watching today, guys. This is my first video, so I don't expect it is the best you've ever watched, but I'm very open to feedback and comments, and I hope you'll join me for future videos.